The pounding on my front door sounded like gunfire. By the time I got there, 2 men in black, HOA enforcement, jackets were already shoving it open, yelling about some violation I didn't even understand. They stomped through my living room, snapping photos, barking threats, and treated my home like it belonged to them. My neighbors peeked from behind curtains, too scared to intervene. But here's the thing. I'm not the kind of man who bows his head. That night, over the roar of engines and the smell of burning rubber, my brothers in leather and steel lined up outside their precious headquarters. If they thought they could intimidate me, they were about to learn what fear really feels like. The echo of their boots stayed in my living room long after they left, like ghosts stamping their claim on my space. My front door hung half off its hinges. The frame split where the lock had given way. The air still smelled like their aftershave, and the cold rain that clung to their jackets. I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding so hard I could hear in my ears. Violation of community standards, they'd said. Illegal modifications. Exterior appearance non-compliant. Those were the words they threw at me like stones before walking out without another look. They didn't care about my explanation. Didn't care that I'd lived here 10 years without a single problem. They just wanted to show power. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street shuffled over, clutching a cardigan around her shoulders. "I told you to watch out for them," she whispered, her eyes darting left and right. "They've been cracking down, making examples." She looked at my door and winced. "You going to call the police?" I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "And tell them what?" "That a bunch of men with clipboards and HOA badges think they're the Gestapo." I shook my head. "Cops won't touch them. Too much red tape." But that wasn't the real reason. Truth was, I wasn't about to hand over my fight to someone else. The rain picked up, drumming on the cracked steps. I pushed the door closed as best I could, leaned it into place, then sat in the dark, staring at nothing. My mind wasn't still. It was mapping, remembering faces, the insignia on their jackets, the smug tilt of their heads when they saw my patched leather vest hanging by the window. That's what this was really about. They didn't like me, or my crew, or the way our bikes looked when they rolled down their manicured streets. My phone buzzed. A single message from Razor. "Heard what happened. You good?" I stared at it for a long moment before replying. Not yet. 2 hours later, I was sitting on the cracked bar stool of the Iron Clutch, the kind of place where the air smelled like beer and chain grease, and the jukebox hadn't worked in a decade. Around me, my crew filtered in one by one, faces hard, eyes sharp. Razor, Tank, Ghost, and the twins, Ash and Ember. They didn't speak at first, just stood in a loose circle, waiting. I told them everything. The way the door went down. The way they moved through my house like they owned it. How they left with a threat hanging in the air. Fix it, or they be back. When I finished, Razor leaned against the wall, arms crossed. That's not enforcement. That's intimidation. They want to play power games. Tank said, his voice low. They picked the wrong guy. I looked at each of them. Their headquarters, it's still that office building on Palmetto, right? Ash grinned. Yup. Glass front, tiny parking lot. No cameras on the east side. Then we paid them a visit, Ember said. It wasn't a question. We planned in silence, the way we always did when it mattered. No grand speeches. No chest beating. Just details, timing, routes, what we'd need. The HQ wasn't big, but it was theirs, and that made it a symbol. They'd used it as a throne for too long, calling the shots over this neighborhood like feudal lords. We weren't going in to burn it down or get locked up. No, this would be surgical. We'd make them feel what they made me feel. Vulnerable. By the time the plan was set, the rain had stopped. The streets outside were slick, reflecting the yellow glow of the streetlights. My patched vest felt heavier than usual as I put it on, like it knew tonight was different. We didn't roll out right away. That wasn't how this kind of thing worked. You don't hit when they expect you. You let the anticipation rot them from the inside. Back home, I barely slept. Every creak of the house sounded like another knock. I thought about my dad, who taught me the difference between pride and ego. Pride was standing up when someone tried to put you down. Ego was swinging just because someone looked at you wrong. What I was feeling now wasn't ego. It was a line being crossed. The next day, I stayed quiet. Let them think maybe I'd taken a hint. Around noon, a flyer appeared on my doorstep. HOA letterhead, bold black print. Final notice. My door still broken, my wall still scarred. I took a photo and sent to Razor. Tonight, the message went around the crew like wildfire. No one asked what time. No one asked for confirmation. They just knew. By midnight, the air outside my house hummed a familiar sound. A dozen V-twin engines idling low, like a pack of predators waiting to move. I stepped out, helmet under my arm, and the crew parted to let me through. Faces hidden behind tinted visors, jackets bristling with patches and road dust. Razor pulled up beside me. You ready? More than they are. We moved as one, engines growling through the sleeping streets, tires hissing on the damp asphalt. Streetlights passed over us like slow-motion lightning, illuminating chrome and steel, then plunging us back into shadow. Palmetto Avenue came into view, its rows of bland office buildings standing like tombstones. At the end, the HOA headquarters squatted in the dark, its sign gleaming under a lone security light. We killed our engines 2 blocks out, rolling silent the rest of the way. That's when I felt it, the shift, the moment when talk turns into action. From here on, there was no going back. If you want, I can move straight into part 2, steel and silence in the night next. So the momentum keeps rolling. This is where things get tense. The stillness was thick enough to choke on. We coasted in, the faint rumble of chains and brakes the only sound. The HOA headquarters loomed ahead, 2 floors of beige stucco and glass, pretending to be important. The kind of building that reeked of overconfidence. Razor signaled with 2 fingers, and we split. Half the crew ghosted toward the back alley. The rest fanned out across the parking lot. My boots crunched on gravel as I approached the east side. No cameras here, just as Ash had said. The glow from the streetlight stopped a few feet short, leaving the wall in shadow. Tank was already there, crouched beside the maintenance door, tools glinting in his hands. The metallic click of a lock yielding was almost too loud in the silence. Inside, the air was stale, humming faintly from the building's old ventilation. I could see the reception desk through the narrow hallway ahead, a row of fake plants lined up like little sentries. We moved with purpose, the soft scuff of our boots muffled by worn carpet. Ghost appeared from the back entrance, giving a nod. Clear. No night guard. Figures, Razor murmured. They're only brave when the sun's up. We split again, each knowing the plan without a word. My target was a war room I'd heard about, where they kept all their files, their meeting notes, their photographs of violations. It was a small, wood-paneled conference room with a long table and a corkboard plaster with grainy pictures of people's homes. Mine was up there too, circled in red marker. Seeing it hit harder than I expected. There it was, my porch, my bike parked in front, my American flag hanging from the railing. And beside it, someone had scribbled, non-compliant. Immediate action required. I pulled the photo down, folded it, and tucked it into my vest. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of why we were here. Meanwhile, the twins were in the office wing, their quiet laughter drifting down the hall as they went to work. They weren't destroying anything, just rearranging. Stacks of files swapped, labels peeled off drawers, key documents vanished into saddlebags. It wasn't about erasing evidence. It was about creating chaos they'd spend weeks untangling. In the break room, Tank found their stash of branded coffee mugs and enamel pins. He set them all on the table in a neat row, then poured motor oil into every single one. Ghost unplugged the office printer and replaced the paper stack with old biker rally flyers. Little touches. Psychological shrapnel. I moved to the front lobby and found the display case, a shrine to themselves. Framed awards for community excellence, glossy photos of board members smiling under balloons. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, helmet dangling from my hand. One sharp tap of my wrench, and the glass fell away in jagged pieces. The sound was sharp and final, like a gavel. Razor came up beside me. Time for the cherry on top? I nodded. From his saddlebag, he pulled the banner we'd made that afternoon. Black vinyl, bold white letters. Respect is earned, not enforced. We hung it across the lobby wall, where the glass case had been. The edges of the banner fluttered slightly in the draft from the vents. Before we left, we gathered in the reception area. Not for a victory speech. Those were for people who needed convincing. We didn't. We all knew what this was. Ash checked the lot from the blinds. Clear. Engines off. We rolled the bikes into position in front of the building. The air smelled faintly of rain again, but was dry enough for the final move. One by one, we revved just enough to let the sound ripple down the empty street, deep and throaty, a warning wrapped in steel. I swung a leg over my bike, the leather seat familiar and solid beneath me. Razor was already watching me, visor up. "You good?" I looked back at the building. Inside, the banner would be the first thing they'd see tomorrow. The files would be scrambled, their little kingdom in disarray. No one hurt, nothing stolen that mattered, just a clean strike to the pride. "I'm better," I said. We kicked our stands up and rolled out slow, the line of bikes snaking into the darkness like a shadow leaving the scene. The sound of our engines rose, then faded into the night, swallowed by the sleeping city. Halfway back to my place, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. The adrenaline was still there, but it wasn't rage anymore. It was something colder, cleaner. Satisfaction. We didn't talk much when we got back to the Iron Clutch. Just parked, grabbed beers, and sat in the dim glow of the bar. The kind of quiet that comes after you've done exactly what you set out to do. I checked my phone, no messages, no calls. They didn't know yet. But by morning, the calls would start. The meetings, the scrambling. And somewhere in all of that, they'd remember my face. I pictured the HOA president, a thin man with a permanent scowl and a tie that looked too tight, walking into that lobby. I could almost hear the silence when he saw the banner, the shuffle of people around him, unsure whether to be angry or afraid. That image stayed with me as I drained the last of my beer. I didn't want to humiliate them for the sake of it. I wanted them to understand that respect isn't something you can demand at the end of a boot. You either build it or you lose it. We didn't make a pact to leave them alone after this. We didn't need to. The message was loud enough without another word. But still, as I rode home in the early hours, I kept checking my mirrors. Not because I thought they'd follow, but because I knew this wasn't over. People like that don't forget being embarrassed. And if they came again, they'd find out the first visit was me being polite. If you want, I can move into part 3. When doors open the wrong way, that's where the retaliation starts and the tension spikes. The morning after felt deceptively normal. Sunlight crept to the blinds. Birds argued in the maple tree outside, and for a few blissful seconds, I thought maybe the night before had been a dream. But then I rolled out of bed and saw the folded photo on my nightstand, the one they'd pinned to their corkboard with that red circle. Reality came rushing back. My phone rang at 8:07. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it was before I picked up. "This is Daniel Huxley, president of the Palmetto Homeowners Association." The voice said, tight and brittle, "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, feigning disinterest. "About the break-in at our headquarters last night," he said, and I could almost hear him choosing each word like a weapon. "Security footage shows motorcycles. Yours among them." I smiled faintly. "Thought you didn't have cameras on the east side." Silence. Then, "We've already contacted the police." "Good," I said. "Then they can see how you kicked my door in without a warrant." The line went dead. For the next 3 days, there was nothing. No cops, no letters, no knocks. My crew told me to be ready for anything, but the quiet began to feel like a trap. And sure enough, on the 4th night, the storm broke. I was in my garage, wiping down my bike, when the sound of tires screeching yanked my head up. A white SUV rolled to a stop across my driveway, blocking me in. 3 men in dark suits stepped out, not the same muscle that had shown up before. These were sharper, colder, the kind of men who measured threats in dollars and influence. The tallest one walked right up to the edge of the garage. "Mr. Cole, we're here to resolve an ongoing conflict," he said, his tone dripping with false civility. "But you're making it difficult." I leaned against my bike, keeping my voice calm. Breaking into my home was supposed to resolve something? That was a procedural enforcement action. His smile was too thin to be real. But your response crossed into criminal behavior. Razor had warned me about this kind of tactic. They wanted me to get loud, to lose control, to make their job easier. Instead, I stepped closer, letting the scent of oil and steel from the garage fill the space between us. "Tell your boss," I said. "If you want to settle this, he knocks like a man, not like a coward." For a moment, I thought he might actually try to push past me. But then he glanced over my shoulder and saw Razor's bike parked beside mine, the custom skull emblem on the gas tank glinting under the light. He turned without another word, and they left. The next morning, the real hit came, not with fists, but with paper. A certified letter, $25,000 in fines for property damage, unlawful entry, and defamation of the HOA. Due immediately, or they pursue legal seizure. I stood on my porch, the letter trembling slightly in my grip, and laughed. It was the kind of laugh that isn't about humor. It's about knowing the other side just showed their hand. They couldn't scare me with boots and doors anymore, so now they were going for the wallet. I called Razor. "They want to play money games." "Then we play money games," he said, "and we win." That night, we met at Ember's auto shop, the only place we could talk without risk of being overheard. The crew was already tossing around ideas, public exposure, community petitions, even rallying the other homeowners they'd bullied over the years. But Razor had something bigger. "You hit a man where it hurts most," he said, "and these people only hurt in two places, their bank account and their reputation." It wasn't just about the fines anymore. It was about dismantling the little empire they'd built. We started digging public records, tax filings, old meeting minutes. Turns out their non-profit HOA had been funneling thousands into consulting services that didn't exist. A shell company. A name that kept popping up. Huxley Management Group. We weren't hackers, but Ash knew a guy. Within 48 hours, we had proof. A trail of payments, invoices for work never done, and signatures that matched our friend Daniel Huxley's handwriting. The crew wanted to dump it online, but I said no. Not yet. Timing was everything. We'd drop it when they'd least expect, when they'd feel safe again. In the meantime, we made smaller moves, helping neighbors challenge bogus fines, showing up to HOA meetings in full colors, sitting quietly in the back while they stumbled over their agenda. We didn't say a word. Our presence was enough. 2 weeks later, the retaliation escalated again. This time, they didn't send men. They sent the county inspectors, every single one they could find. Noise complaints, zoning violations, claims that my garage was an unlicensed repair facility. By the third visit in as many days, even the inspectors looked embarrassed. One of them, a younger guy with a beard, leaned in as he left and muttered, "You've made someone powerful very nervous." That night, I knew it was time to end it. We arranged a little gathering at the community clubhouse under the guise of a neighborhood improvement forum. Flyers went out, and to our surprise, the place was packed. People I'd never spoken to before, some of their own HOA horror stories, others just curious. Huxley was there too, standing at the front with his tie a little too tight, smiling like he owned the air we breathed. He launched into a speech about protecting property values and community harmony, and I waited until murmurs of boredom had settled before stepping forward. "Mind if I ask a question?" I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Huxley hesitated. "Go ahead." I held up a folder thick with printed documents. "How exactly does paying your own shell company for fake consulting services protect property values?" The room went dead quiet. Someone coughed. Somewhere in the back, Razor chuckled under his breath. I stepped closer to the podium, eyes locked on his. "Because I got invoices, bank records, and your signature on all of it. And if you want, we can have this conversation with the local paper tomorrow." His face drained of color. For the first time, I saw it, the crack in his armor. Huxley's lips parted like he was going to speak, but no words came out. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. I could feel every eye in the clubhouse on us. Neighbors shifting in their seats, whispering, glancing between him and me like they were watching a fight they'd always wanted to see but never thought would happen. I didn't press. The silence was doing more damage than anything I could say. People could smell fear, and right now, Huxley reeked of it. Finally, he tried to recover. "Mr. Cole, these accusations are baseless." I set the folder on the podium with a solid thud. "They're not accusations, Daniel. They're facts. Facts that will be in the hands of every homeowner here tomorrow morning if you don't step down tonight." Gasps rolled through the room. Somewhere in the back, Mrs. Alvarez murmured, "About time." Huxley's eyes darted to his board members, looking for backup. But the thing about power built on intimidation is that when the foundation cracks, the whole structure wobbles. The treasurer stared at the floor. The secretary crossed her arms and looked away. Not one of them came to his defense. "You're bluffing," he muttered, but it sounded like he was trying to convince himself. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. "Try me." The meeting ended with no vote, no announcement. Just Huxley walking out the side door like a man who knew his kingdom had just been set on fire. By the next morning, the documents were in every mailbox. We didn't put our names on them. We didn't have to. The paper trail spoke for itself. Payments to the shell company, fake contracts, board-approved expenses for consulting, that never happened. And right alongside it, a timeline of every questionable enforcement action the HOA had taken over the past 3 years. My broken door was just the tip of the iceberg. The neighborhood lit up. People who had been silent for years were suddenly loud, demanding refunds, calling emergency meetings, threatening lawsuits. For once, the HOA wasn't the predator. They were the prey. 2 weeks later, an official letter arrived, not in an envelope stamped with the HOA logo, but from a law firm. Huxley had resigned for personal reasons. The remaining board members had dissolved the enforcement team entirely. No more surprise visits. No more procedural enforcement actions. But the real victory came quietly. One evening, I was out front tuning the idle on my bike when a couple I'd never spoken to walked over. They lived 3 streets down, the kind of people who usually avoided making eye contact with me. We just wanted to say, the man started rubbing the back of his neck. "Thanks for what you did. We've been paying bogus fines for years." His wife smiled faintly. "It feels different now, like we can breathe." I nodded. "Just keep an eye on them. Power's like a weed. It grows back if you don't pull the roots." That night, the crew met the Iron Clutch for what Razor called a quiet celebration. No big party, no fireworks, just the same scar table, the same battered chairs, and the same brothers and sisters who had my back when it counted. Ghost raised his bottle. To doors that stay on their hinges. To enemies that stay in the rear view, Ember added. We clinked bottles, the sound sharp in the smoky air. Later, Razor caught me outside, leaning against the wall under the flickering neon sign. "You know this isn't the last time someone like Huxley's gonna cross you, right?" I smirked. "Good. Gives me something to look forward to." The weeks rolled on. The HOA was a shadow of itself, limping through meetings with barely enough members to make decisions. Word around the block was that Huxley had left town, maybe for good. Nobody knew for sure, and nobody cared enough to find out. But the best part wasn't seeing him fall. It was watching the neighborhood change. People started fixing up their homes without fear of a citation for the color of their shutters. Kids played in the street without some clipboard warrior telling their parents it violated community safety protocols. The place actually felt like a community again, not a kingdom. One night, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Respect is earned, not enforced. The same words we'd hung in their lobby. No threat, no signature, just a quiet acknowledgement. I didn't tell the crew about it. Some things you keep for yourself. Months later, I was riding solo down Palmetto when I passed the old HOA headquarters. The banner was long gone, replaced by a "for lease" sign. The glass still showed faint scratches from the night we'd been there. I slowed just enough to take it in, then rolled the throttle and kept going. The fight was over. We'd won, but the road ahead, that was still wide open. And somewhere deep down I knew, if another door ever swung open the wrong way, the sound of a dozen engines would be right behind me. Because in this world, there are 2 kinds of people, the ones who use power to control, and the ones who use it to protect. I knew exactly which side I was on. If you felt that roar in your chest, if you've ever wanted to stand up to the ones who think they own you, then you know this fight isn't just mine. It's ours. Hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to QAStories, because here, we don't just tell stories. We bring justice to life.